English translation. 589th contact. Monday, the 16th of June 2014, 15:11 hours.
Hello, Ta. There you are, my friend. Greetings and welcome. I was still with Pius on the tennis court because I had to give him a few meters of electric hose so he could tie back various trees and bushes. Exactly at the time you arrived, just a few minutes earlier than you announced.
I also greet you, dear friend Edouard, and thanks for coming. Sometimes it simply happens that time allows you to be a few minutes earlier at the place where you want to be.
Or sometimes also a few minutes later, depending on the situation. If it is only a few minutes before or after a set time, then there is nothing wrong with that. But if it is a longer time, then sometimes urgent work cannot be done because of the early arrival, or if unpleasant things happen because you arrive too late. When I still had the trade patent, I made an appointment with someone at 9 o'clock because I had to be at a certain place at 10 o'clock to do business. Unfortunately, the person in question did not show up and should have taken me in his car to the place of business, because he did not show up until 15 o'clock hours and said that he was there now and that we could leave. Of course, it was too late, and as a result, I was also unable to complete the transaction, which cost me a loss of around 11,000 francs.
With us, it is always a matter of a few minutes.
Correct, and I am glad about that because unpunctuality is an abomination to me. 4, 5, or even 10 minutes more or less is within my tolerance range, but I do not appreciate anything that goes beyond that unless there is a good reason for not keeping the agreed time.
Which I can understand.
Yes, because you also think in the same way, as you once said yourself. But tell me, have you looked into the future because of something special with the climate, the weather, and what is going to happen in the near future in Ukraine as well as in Iraq and Syria?
I have exceptionally and really only exceptionally complied with your wish. Because we do not want to start again with predictions. Because Earth humans do not react to them and continue in all their bad ways without heeding the warnings. Now, however, I have nevertheless made an effort to look at a few future events. And so I can tell you in chronological order that next Thursday, the 19th of June, around Istanbul, there will be a very rare weather event for this area, because a large and strong tornado will sweep across the Bosporus accompanied by heavy thunderstorms, squalls, and torrential rain, causing no harm to the human beings, but minor and major damage. There is also a lot going on in Ukraine, and this is in the context of the EU, which is flirting with this country, as you called it. So it will come to pass that the new ruler in Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, will sign a partnership agreement with the EU on the 27th of June in the interests of large sections of the population, with the aim of securing Ukraine's advance accession to the EU, so to speak. The EU rulers themselves decide on new sanctions against Russia within the same time frame in order to force the dictatorial ruler Putin to behave towards Ukraine in an EU manner. Interesting two things arise in France, where on the 1st of July, former President Nicolas Sarkozy will be detained for a few hours for questioning on corruption, etc., for which purpose he will be investigated. This is the first time this has happened in France. It is also to be noted that within the same time frame, the Court of Justice in Strasbourg will confirm the ban on burqas decided in France and will come into force. At the same time, in Japan, an amendment to Article 9 of the Constitution is adopted, under which the Japanese Army may henceforth provide military assistance to allied states in the event of an attack in the spirit of collective self-defense. This constitutional amendment will then make it possible for Japan to provide military assistance to allied states without itself being involved in a state of war or revolution. In the Kurdistan region of Iraq, the Kurds are also defending themselves against the ISIS terrorists, with the Kurdish Peshmerga militia playing a particularly important role, which took over military might on the 12th of June. This elite unit is now reorganizing itself and gathering thousands of fighters from the people to confront and defeat the ISIS Islamists. In addition, The Kurds want to make Kurdistan a state of their own, as they have always wanted to do, and more efforts are now being made to achieve this, while the government in Baghdad can do little about it and is also losing power in northern Iraq. On the 5th of July, it will turn out that the terrorist Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who has been believed dead for about 10 years, will emerge from hiding in Iraq, proclaim a caliphate, and call himself Caliph Ibrahim. The man is completely unscrupulous and degenerates in every respect, following which he starts his old terrorist trade all over again. He also publicly confesses to being the leader of ISIS, the New Gods warrior terror organization that emerged from the terrorist organization Al-Qaeda and which is up to its murderous mischief in Syria and Iraq. The Sunni terrorist leader wants to establish a common divine state in Iraq and Syria and involve the Shiites and all those who oppose him and his terrorist troops in a civil war, in order to ultimately be able to play the role of state leader. Whatever else is important, whatever you are interested in, that is what is happening in Israel and Gaza, because a new serious escalation is taking place there, leading to heavy military operations that could possibly lead to a new war, because Syria is also involved in supplying combat missiles and other war material to Hamas. In the Far East, the cyclone period begins with an unusually severe typhoon which will affect Japan in particular. These are the events I can predict.
Thanks. Then something else. When I look at the sky today, I find that it is always hazy blue-gray, not as azure blue as it was 70 years ago. I am well aware that all the evil and negative effects of overpopulation have destroyed everything and put an enormous amount of dirt into the atmosphere, resulting in atmospheric pollution. What happened to the destruction of the atmosphere, however, also happened in nature, because the human beings of the earth also maltreated the atmosphere in such a way that many plant and animal species became extinct because their entire habitat was destroyed, both through the application of all kinds of chemicals and as a result of the construction of fertile land. Many insects, plants and animals, as well as many animals and also the human beings are dependent on each other. Therefore, for example, plant species die out when certain insects are no longer present, while on the other hand, the insects die out when the plants that contribute to the life support are no longer present. The best example of this is bees, which have been killed for years and are no longer able to pollinate the blossoms of fruit trees and flowers, etc. I think that these evils in particular could still be remedied by the human beings if they immediately and strictly prohibited all chemicals of any kind that are applied to nature and its flora, and therefore also to trees, bushes, grasses, shrubs, etc., and to all vegetables, grains, and seeds. In the course of time, chemicals poison not only all plant life, but also the world of insects, animals, fish, birds, reptiles, and animals, and ultimately also the human beings.
The whole use of chemicals, which includes pesticides, herbicides, neonicotinoids, antibiotics, and artificial fertilizers of all kinds, is absolutely against all reason and all reason of Earth humans, but fundamentally against the laws of nature, and therefore, as you say, they should be completely forbidden. Only if the use of chemicals is stopped and also the exhaust fumes from explosion engines and all other dangerous emissions of all kinds reaching the atmosphere and into nature and its fauna and flora are completely prevented. Nature, as well as the atmosphere, can recover again within an estimated 70 to 100 years. But it also implies that overpopulation will be reduced by a rigorous and controlled worldwide halt to births, and that all the harmful effects largely resulting from overpopulation will be contained, but unfortunately cannot be definitively eliminated. The whole process of reparation can only affect a certain part, because all that has already been destroyed and devastated cannot be reversed. Because all the destruction and devastation which has taken place as direct and indirect degenerations of unreasonable overpopulation, and which will also continue to take its toll as long-term effects, is absolutely irreparable.
It is madness that many things are being decided and done to address the needs of overpopulation. For example, more and more chemicals are being applied to promote the growth of berries, fruits, vegetables, herbs, and fruit, and to protect these foods from pests, which of course poisons everything, and the toxins are also absorbed by the human beings because they are deposited in all these natural foods, which is of course disputed by the chemists and the food producers. Even the chemical poisons that are applied to the seeds to protect them from pests get into the plants, and thus also back into the food cycle, and this also applies to the human beings. The same is also true of antibiotics, which are used to mistreat animals, poultry, and all sorts of other creatures, and the human beings then eat the meat contaminated with antibiotics, making them resistant to antibiotics as a result of overmedication with antibiotics. Nothing is being done to research and apply natural growth promoters or pesticides, but everything is being done to continue to promote chemistry and to poison and infect everything with it, including the human beings themselves.
This is indeed in every respect as you say, where it is only about the quick and big profit that can be made through chemistry, while through all the behavior irresponsibly, the destruction of fauna and flora, and the many damages to the health of Earth humans are accepted. This, while the whole thing is one of the degenerated consequences of overpopulation, which demands more and more food, which can only be created by driving toxic chemical substances to rapid and large growth. But the fact that these naturally growing foods lose a lot of their taste and nutrients and contain more or less dangerous toxic substances for Earth humans is of no concern to the chemical companies or the breeders of the foods, who use chemistry without hesitation. The Earth humans, as the final consumers of these foods, also do not care. It is a fact, however, that all toxic substances applied to flowers, fruit, buds, herbs, seeds, cereals, berries, vegetables, and fruit do not volatilize. Just as when antibiotics are administered to animals, poultry, and other creatures, because everything is contaminated with toxic substances, and Earth humans absorb these substances when eating food. Of course, the toxic substances in this form are then only small and sometimes cannot even be detected by the earthly chemists. But nevertheless, they are harmful to health and promote cancer, other diseases, or creeping infirmity in many human beings.
If the chemists cannot detect something, it does not mean that there is no poison in fruits, vegetables, grains, and berries, herbs, and meat. For my part, I think it is idiotic that certain minimal amounts of poison should not be harmful to human beings, as the state health authorities and their chemists claim.
This is indeed not the case. As I explained earlier, because even the smallest amounts of toxins have harmful effects on the human organism, which often last for life, and where it is not possible to clarify their origin and what they are, and therefore they cannot be treated or cured. And indeed, there are many protracted and languishing ailments among Earth humans which are due solely to toxic substances in food, and which chemists and health authorities irresponsibly refer to as allegedly harmless amounts, even though even the smallest amounts in the micro-range weight have a detrimental effect on the overall health of the human beings.
I recall your statement on this matter. But there are now also organic products that are supposed to be healthier and taste better than chemically treated foods. You have looked into this, and you have also looked into various organic foods and earthly foods contaminated with chemicals. What was the result, and what can you say about it?
Even so-called organic products usually contain minimal toxic substances introduced by wind and water, etc., even if the toxins may be so small that chemists cannot detect them. It is indeed a rarity that organic foods do not contain toxic substances, because to the extent that the soil is chemically contaminated and therefore poisoned all over the world, it is almost impossible nowadays for plant foods or foods for sowing not to come into contact with any chemical substances through the roots and air and become contaminated. And as far as the taste of food produced in gardens, greenhouses, fields, etc. is concerned, there is practically no, or at least little difference in this respect compared to those treated with chemicals. Only the imagination of Earth humans gives them the illusion that organic products would taste better than chemically treated food, because there is usually no or very little difference.
But with all this organic theater, a lot of money is made, which the organic believers in their imagination are paying for, because they are of the belief that they would eat better and live better than those who can only afford the food impregnated with chemicals.
That is also correct what you say.
Well then, one question. Do you know anything about how degenerating the weather will really be in the coming time? For my part, I have already pointed out in my letters and publications that the whole thing is getting worse and worse, but I would be interested in the connections. How and why everything is getting worse and worse and leading to primeval natural events, such as ever more violent hurricanes and real floods, hailstorms and enormous snowfalls.
By the criminal machinations and the guilt and unreasonableness of the Earth humans, namely with regard to the irresponsible breeding of overpopulation and all the machinations resulting from it with regard to the worldwide destruction of nature, the fauna and flora, the harmful influence on the atmosphere, the contamination of waters, the drying up of water bodies as well as the unreasonable diversion or damming up of water bodies, the poisoning and destruction of fields, soil, and the entire plant world, as well as the climate through dangerous gases and toxic substances, and the unlimited exploitation of the Earth's resources, the entire Earth's wind system has been affected in such a way that it is out of order. So the enormous mass of overpopulation through all its machinations influencing and destroying nature is the real trigger for the fact that a rapid climate change has been able to start and can now continue to occur strongly, which from now on will continue worldwide and lead to worse and worse weather extremes. The reason is that the irresponsible Earth humans' activities and all their effects have not only largely impaired nature's natural development, but have also destroyed it to some extent. The Earth humans, through their irrationality, have caused great and almost irreparable damage to the geosphere. That is to say, to the Earth's mantle, and thus to that part of the Earth in which the rocky crust of the Earth, the water and air cover adjoin each other. It has also caused enormous and irreparable damage to the biosphere, that is to say, to the entire habitat or all layers of the Earth populated by living organisms. We should also mention the enormous damage and destruction that has taken place in the lithosphere and the Earth's crust, which extends down to the Earth's 1,200 kilometers deep rocky shell. The hydrosphere is also damaged in its entire area of the Earth, which is made up of the oceans, inland waters, groundwater, water bound in ice, and water present in the atmosphere. Finally, the atmosphere or air envelope must also be mentioned, which is so polluted worldwide by toxic pollutant emissions that Earth humans, animals, creatures, and many other creatures, as well as the smallest and largest plants and trees, are also damaged by them. All spheres have already been negatively influenced to such an extent that they in turn promote climate change, but also affect the two south tropical and the two north polar jet streams and push them outside the norm. Many factors play a part in this, such as the fact that solar radiation heats up the air much more in the equatorial regions than is the case in the polar regions. This results in high-pressure zones and low-pressure zones with corresponding wind cells, whereby a balance is created by the air entering the low-pressure zones from the high-pressure zones. The Earth's rotation then drives the air currents eastwards, forming jet streams, while very strong winds and storms are generated in the southern part of the Earth, directly above the surface. Jet streams are large-scale atmospheric wind bands that form as a result of the compensatory movement between high and low pressure areas. They are usually located in the region between the troposphere and stratosphere and flow almost horizontally around the Earth at wind speeds of up to around 700 kilometers per hour. The polar jet streams have been shifting more and more towards the poles for about 70 years now, with the result that many regions of the Earth are affected by primeval weather extremes and a climate change that is bringing much and more disaster to mankind and the planet, as you have repeatedly stated since the 1950s. So the thunderstorms and the associated floods are increasing and strengthening through ever stronger torrential rain masses, just as all other weather phenomena are becoming more extreme and the destructive consequences more and more primeval. Less than 4 years ago, the time had already dawned, which can be shown that since then, nature has been rebelling more and more often with more and more severe storms, and consequently, natural disasters are becoming more and more frequent and also more powerful. As I said before, consequently, all natural events are coming closer and closer to those as they ruled on Earth in primeval times. So everything will become much worse than its effects have been in the last few years. This is because of the unreasonable and malicious as well as destructive machinations of the earthly overpopulation, which intervene in nature up to the jet streams. These are the sole consequences of the rampant overpopulation, because the more it has grown rapidly over the last 70 years, the more the destructive direct and indirect influences and interventions in the nature of the earth have damaged it on the one hand very severely and on the other hand even destroyed it, and consequently corresponding effects up to the atmosphere and in the jet streams have become unavoidable. If the earth had remained with a normal human population, all these effects could not have happened, because a normal population could never have led to such natural and climatic changes. This means that also the jet streams would not have been so affected in their functioning that they now have such an impact worldwide that tremendous natural disasters occur, which in turn kill countless human beings and destroy human achievements.
Good. Thanks for your statement. But let's not talk about that now because I have this report here if you want to read it. Marianne and Willem have translated it.
Ta reads,
PR Web online visibility from Vocus NASA engineer. The Billy Meier UFO case is real.
Matthew Wichkowitz, who supported NASA projects like Space Shuttle, International Space Station, working for Boeing and Honeywell, endorses Swiss UFO contactee, partners with They Fly Productions for public presentations. Flagstaff, Arizona PR Web, the 20th of May, 2014. Matthew Wichkowitz, a career aerospace engineer, has publicly endorsed the authenticity of the Billy Meier UFO case, ongoing in Switzerland for over 72 years. I first encountered the Billy Meier case when I was studying aviation at ASU. In 1978, I was also interested in the UFO phenomenon, and when the Meier photos were first released, I thought they were intriguing. But I fell for the CIA disinformation campaign, which called them a hoax. So I paid no attention to it for another 30 years, though I maintained an interest in the UFO phenomenon in general. Then in 2011, I saw an article on a news website that mentioned one of Billy Meier's claims had come true. So I went back and rediscovered the case and was surprised to see how much information is available compared to 1978. I went in with an open mind and spent the better part of 18 months reading all the material I could find and finally came to the conclusion that it is real, said Wichkowitz. Because of his aerospace engineering background, Wichkowitz is convinced Meier's UFO evidence is real, such as the newly authenticated 1981 photos of the controversial WCUFO and his 1975 film of the so-called pendulum UFO. And he is not alone. Respected scientists like Michael Malin NASA, Mars Mission, and David Froning long ago recognized the authenticity of Billy Meier's UFO evidence and the importance of his information on hyperspace propulsion. Recently, formerly skeptical physician and physicist, Dr. Sanford Weinstein also endorsed Meier's information regarding Russian military movements that he published decades before they occurred. Weichkowitz later became interested in Meier's long history of publishing prophetically accurate scientific information. He agrees that recent reports from NASA and U.S. government scientists corroborate Meier's warnings. From as far back as the 1950s about climate change, global warming, and the catastrophic environmental and weather-related consequences already upon us. Humanity should recognize the valuable assistance offered by the Plejaren extraterrestrials through Billy Meier for solving the most serious problems facing our world today, said Weichkowitz. Michael Horn, the American media representative for the Billy Meier case, and Matthew Weichkowitz will co-facilitate multimedia presentations on the evidence, information, and documentation on the scientific evidence beginning this fall. Various venues will include colleges, universities, and scientific forums. The higher standard of proof Horn states that many examples of Meier's specific, prophetically accurate information are ironclad, based on copyrights establishing his publication of the information long before official discovery, and that this is the higher standard of proof. Horn's new film, And Did They Listen?, is now available internationally.
What do you think?
It is indeed gratifying, because it seems that certain persons are now slowly gaining insight and that the reality and truth of your contacts with us, Plejaren, and the authenticity of your photos are also being recognized by former doubters. Although there are many who have discredited you through liars and slanderers, this does not help the matter in any way, as now well-known persons have recognized the truth. Your words that you used in the past come to my mind. The light brings the truth to light, and the truth always proves itself to be truth.
I also find it gratifying, especially because it is people from the USA, where I have been particularly vilified by a well-known UFO organization and accused of being a fraud and charlatan. This happened and still happens in Switzerland, too, especially through a would-be connoisseur of my contacts, who calls himself a journalist and author of a scribbled journal and is also connected with the slander of my ex-wife and son. But also in Germany is a person who is active as a UFO scout and who has no idea about UFOs and about my contacts with you, Plejaren, but who nevertheless makes big and morbidly stupid words on TV about unknown flying objects and about mine. So it is also the case in Switzerland and in Germany that certain antagonists and know-it-alls slandered me and accused me of lying and cheating in matters of my contacts and photos, and still do so today. So especially in Switzerland and Germany there are certain very clever antagonists and slanderers, who not only spread their insults, lies, and slander on the internet, but also in certain cheeseleaf journals and on TV, all to ridicule my personality and the contacts and photos.
You really had very bad experiences with the USA, as we also did when we tried to get in contact with the government there regarding a certain matter through you as a mediator.
I remember that very well, and also that you distanced yourselves from the USA because impossible demands were being made by them.
Which will remain irrevocably the same, even if, according to this report, there are now apparently people who are finally finding the way to the truth, and who are obviously committed to you.
I will not get involved with the USA anymore either, especially not because I will not get involved in investigations and inquiries about UFOs anymore. This matter is closed for me, because in the meantime everything concerning my contacts with you, Plejaren, has been clarified and does not need any more attention, publicity, or controversy. Also not concerning the photos I was allowed to take of the beamships of Simyase and Quetzal. Furthermore, I do not want to have anything more to do with journalists from newspapers, journals, television and radio and the like, because as a rule they are only interested in sensationalism and not in reality and truth anyway. So they twist the facts into lies and slander. Honest journalism with effective, truthful reporting has long since ceased to be of any importance to Earthlings. So-called UFO experts and UFO researchers can also be stolen from me, because I have also had bad experiences with them. So I can very well do without getting involved with people of all these calibers. especially also because they only exploit their own confused views, opinions, and assumptions, and do not want to focus on the truth and not on reporting it honestly and in a valuable way. And this precisely in relation to the most important thing, namely the mission, in which ufology was only of importance at the beginning of the contacts and the mission, as a hanger, so to speak. Although today the whole thing is only a secondary matter for all those human beings who know about the truth of the contacts and who are interested in the official contact conversations. And the human beings also know that the mission is still important to me alone in terms of the spiritual teaching, in terms of becoming public and spreading it. And these are now the human beings directly around me, and also all the many worldwide who are striving for the teaching or will sooner or later still do so. And all those who strive for the teaching are learning diligently and gaining great advantages in terms of their evolution of consciousness and also a new, good and positive way of life. In doing so, many of them change and turn upside down their traditional life in a positive way. That is to say, their world of thoughts, feelings, and behavior. In this way, they find better interpersonal relationships and cultivate love, peace, freedom, friendship, and harmony with themselves and with their fellow human beings. They also learn to cope better with their own existence, as many letters, e-letters, faxes, telephone calls, and personal conversations prove again and again. So the mission is unreservedly the most important thing, just that only and officially only the spiritual teachings with their enormous extent must be my worldwide field of activity. And time is pressing more and more human beings to benefit from it and find the correct way of life with all the trimmings. And it is only through the fact that more and more human beings find the correct path that one day everything can come to such a point that finally and truly a humanity lives on earth, in which every single human being honestly strives for and cultivates true love, peace, freedom, and harmony in order to fight all evils such as wars, terrorism, religions, sectarianism, lies, deceit, slander, hatred, jealousy, revenge and retribution, the death penalty as well as crime and crimes, etc., and make them disappear.
And what you, in cooperation with all your faithful, have achieved so far in only about 40 years, that very many human beings in all continents of the earth now know about the teaching of truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of life, and learn the spiritual beings directly through your spiritual teaching study course, or through your large number of books and writings, as well as through the internet, and benefit from it in terms of their evolution of consciousness. This is a fact that cannot be denied. It is also undeniable that many Earth humans have found their way to themselves since your work, and have changed their ways of life and behavior for the good and positive. In contrast to the work of all religions and sects which have not been successful in this way, as your teaching has an evolutionary effect. All this I can truthfully confirm, for all this is proven by our ongoing observations and investigations in this regard.
I did not know that you were making an effort in this regard. But now I want to ask something about the 4 groups of people unknown to you, who are working here on Earth. Is it still the case that none of the 4 groups can locate you and thus determine your presence on Earth?
This is indeed the case and will also remain so, because we will not make ourselves recognizable to them and will therefore continue to avoid that they can locate or observe us. As a result, all our flying apparatus in the earthly space are shielded against any view and technical location. This has always been the case and will also remain so, because our interests for our stay in earthly space are solely related to your mission on this earth, which began 389,000 years ago with Henoch, a late successor personality of Nocodemion, on Earth, but then some 13,500 years ago, through your other predecessor personalities, Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad, led to today's mission. But this is better known to you than to me. Further, the following is to be said about the 4 foreign groups. Thanks to the help of the Sonar, the friendly people of Asket in the Dal universe, which is technically much more advanced than us Playaran, and from whose high technology we have been benefiting for decades because we are allowed to acquire it with their consent. We have been given new opportunities in the last 3 weeks to get unnoticed by at least the group that is foreign to us and has been very active in the last decades, that they have no knowledge of us at all. This is because their technology is still very underdeveloped in comparison to ours. Despite the high level of development, and consequently they have no technical or other possibility to perceive our presence. In the meantime, because new techniques are available to us, we have studied the strangers in detail and have been able to learn a great deal about them, but I am not allowed to talk about this for reasons of secrecy. But it will remain, as I said, that we do not wish to establish contact with this or any other grouping, because we play Yaren and our federated states are not interested in establishing contact with these groups. Even if one of the groups we have researched has a relatively high level of technical development, which is superior in every respect to all earthly technology, but not to ours. So we hold ourselves back in relation to all 4 groups, and do not feel compelled to make contact with them, for there is neither reason nor necessity.
Recently, various television programs have been reporting on earlier UFO observations and also on various strange UFO encounters. To my knowledge, at least as you told me earlier, all these observations and encounters are not connected with you, Plejaren, in one single case.
We on Earth have never been involved in such observations and encounters since ancient times. However, we are well aware that incidents concerning observations and encounters have taken place in connection with Earth humans and unknown flying objects, or UFOs, as the common name is. But we only know this since we have had the opportunity to do so in the last 1.5 decades through the technology of the sonar. Before that, we were unfortunately deceived in many ways by many imaginative Earth humans through lies and deception, as well as charlatanism and also fun. Only with the technology of the sonar we were able to clarify that many Earth humans who reported alleged observations and encounters or even alleged contacts with Earth foreigners only told lies and charlatanism, as well as fraud with fake pictures and films. Others, on the other hand, invented alleged experiences and even inflicted strange little injuries on their bodies, which they described as marks and signs, etc., added to them by Earth foreigners. Many of these people were addicted to the desire for renown, as is also the case today, along with religious and sectarian motives and financial profit motives. But when Earth humans have observed flying objects or UFOs unknown to them, and encounters with such flying apparatus have taken place, and are still taking place around the world, then these refer today and in the future only to the 4 foreign groups, and in no way to us, the Plejaren, or our federated ones. But if we behaved in such a way that our flying apparatus could be observed by Earth humans, then this was unintentional and therefore providential, as in the case of the German woman, Elsa Schroeder, who unexpectedly met my daughter Simyase outside Zahedan in Persia on the 20th of February 1975. It was also an unintentional thing, and therefore an act of providence. When you were commissioned in Schmarbul, Maiwinkel on the 14th of May, 1976 to photograph Simyase's flying apparatus during demonstration flights, when she was pursued and chased back and forth for 10 minutes by a Mirage fighter of the Swiss Air Force. This was because my daughter Simyase did not shield her flying apparatus from radar detection, but only from direct view so that it could be located by radar from Dubendorf Military Airport and tracked by the Mirage fighter. The pilot blindly flew around Simyase's flying apparatus without being able to see it himself, as he only flew around it following radio instructions from the radar observers. The reason why core group and passive group members were able to take pictures of our flying apparatus was that we opened our screens wedge-shaped especially for them, so that the members could expose their films. This also applied to the man who took the pseudonym Pergler and who was allowed to take some pictures near the center in 2001. However, we only allowed such pictures from a certain distance. So pictures could never be taken in the quality you were able to take according to our instructions in order to have proof of our existence and your statements. But even in this way, we were always careful that we could not be observed, so that there was also only a wedge-shaped channel of vision from the flying apparatus to your picture or film camera, and thus open to your eyes. Accordingly, our flying apparatus could also not be observed by other persons, even if they were standing right next to you.
I know all that because you privately pointed it out to me from time to time.
That is so, yes. Once again, I want to ask how your biography is progressing. I also want to say that you should think about giving public lectures again. On the one hand, regarding our existence, and on the other hand, also regarding your mission and the teaching of the truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of the life.
Because of the biography, we have unfortunately not yet joined in, but I am talking to Bernadette so that we can get on with it as soon as possible. And as far as public speaking is concerned, we will probably have to talk about it at a general meeting.
You should bear in mind that time does not stand still. On the one hand, with regard to the biography. On the other hand, also with regard to an authoritative public relations work in the form of informative lectures, etc. This is necessary because there is no missionary work being done. So information has to be passed on to the outside world so that the Earth humans can be made aware of it.
Of course, I know what you mean.
Then I would like to discuss some things with you privately and also tell you that I will be absent for the next 4 weeks together with my daughter Plagia and will stay with my daughter Simyase. If something extraordinary should happen, you can call Enjana or Florina to inform Quetzal, because he will be there in the meantime if the need arises. If now you have no more questions?
I do not.
Then I will ask you first.